Hello, everybody. I'm Shane Tinsley, and I'm here with Dr. Levy, and we are going to interview him about academic medicine. And Dr. Phillip Levy is an endowed professor, the Edward S. Thomas Professor at Wayne State University School of Medicine, and he currently serves as the Assistant Vice President for Translational Sciences and Clinical Research Innovation, and Associate Chair for Research in the Department of Emergency Medicine. In addition, he is the Chief Innovation Officer for Wayne Health. Dr. Levy is a fellow of multiple professional societies, including the American College of Emergency Physicians, the American Heart Association, and the American College of Cardiology. Dr. Levy is the leading cardiovascular disease researcher who has overseen more than 100 funded studies from various entities since his arrival at Wayne State in 2002, including the CDC and NIH. In addition, he has published more than 250 manuscripts in textbook chapters and has been invited to lecture on cardiovascular disease and other healthcare topics more than 300 times. Since March 2020, Dr. Levy has been leading Wayne State's COVID-19 testing program and has overseen the development of its mobile testing platform. And in addition, Dr. Levy is leading Wayne State's Phoenix project, which seeks to create a fully integrated platform that combines comprehensive patient-level information with a broad range of social determinants, streamlining the ability of researchers, foundations, funders, and community members to identify upstream targets for intervention and passively track downstream outcare benefits. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Levy.
Thanks, Shane. Couldn't have said any of that better myself. I appreciate you enduring reading through all that bio that I sent you. So thank you.
No problem. It's my pleasure. All right. Let's get into the interview. So can you give us a little background about yourself outside the biography? So can you give us a little story?
Yeah, so I'm from New York originally, grew up on Long Island, and went and did college at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I've always been kind of an East Coast guy. Got into medical school, took a year off before actually attending, deferred my acceptance and moved out to Colorado. While I was out there, I taught skiing to disabled skiers for an organization called the Breckenridge Outdoor Education Center. It was amazing. I met my now ex-wife out there and moved to Michigan with her after the season was over, after medical school and everything, and have been here working in and around Detroit since, and kind of came kicking and screaming to Michigan, to be honest with you, from New York. I'm a New Yorker. I could throw a couple of drinks at me and my accent will pop out, but otherwise I keep it hidden. But I'm really, I've always liked New York and the big city and all of that. And Michigan, I kind of came kicking and screaming. But when I got here, I realized there is a tremendous need for people who are interested in driving population level change in the city of Detroit and targeting the long-term social, societal, biological ills that afflict the population and lead to earlier onset of disease. And I came out here and I had started doing work in New York, focused on typically emergency medicine stuff. Went into emergency medicine because I wanted to be a physician that always had all the knowledge, no matter what came their way, right? If you're a subspecialist, you know about your subspecialty, but you kind of lose a lot of the other stuff you learn in medical school, purposefully for many. And as emergency doc, you don't have to do that. And so you get to, learn a lot about a lot. But when I came here to Detroit, what I kind of realized was my career and passion of focusing on emergency care and acute care really, over time became supplanted by recognizing the population needs and trying to really understand how can academia, Wayne State in particular, and my role there kind of all come together to really drive change. And that's, maybe something that doesn't come through, or maybe it does in the bio, but it's really more like, this evolution in thinking that happens when you're in an environment and in a set of circumstances that, that have such apparent need that seems to be going unaddressed.
That's amazing. And I think that all ties into the amazing opportunities one can gain in an academic career. And we're going to start off with our main point, talk about expertise, which you kind of talked about as an emergency medicine physician. So my first question to you would be, what are your short-term and long-term goals as an academic physician, especially within emergency medicine?
Yeah. There's a really nice article by David Brooks in the New York Times that talks about sort of two mountains in life and where you're at in your careers. And I think if you ask that question to the me of 10 years ago, it's different than the answer I'll give you right now. And so when you're early on in academia, there's a lot of hurdles you're trying to jump, a lot of ladders you're trying to climb, and a direction you're trying to go. So the academic journey starts as an instructor or an assistant professor and become, and you move to associate professor and professor. At each stage along the way, your aspirations academically evolve. So when you're an instructor, you're trying to become an assistant professor, you're trying to get that first grant, you're trying to get first author publications, trying to build up your portfolio of expertise. Once you get to a certain level, you become an associate professor. It kind of flips a little bit. You're still building on your expertise, but now you're trying to take the next generation with you, right? And trying to build people's careers up. And so over time, you transition from being the primary author, first author on a paper, to the last author. The last author is the senior investigator, the one who supports everything but doesn't necessarily do everything, if that makes sense. And then, you get a little further on, you go towards the professor level, and, it's really all about how can you build and grow and create the pipeline for future generations to step into so that they too can, flourish academically. And one of the beautiful things about academia is that as you develop your expertise, you get freedom to explore within that area. And so, so that's the beginning. That's like often the first mountain is ascending those things. And then you get to the first mountain. I'm a tenured professor, a full professor, and you're like, all right, well, this is awesome. Now what, right? And so then you can start to think about beyond your world of academics and how you fit in that towards what your bigger contribution can be to things beyond academia, to society, to the community, to the world in general, or whatever it is. And so, my goals right now really center on trying to make Wayne State the single greatest, urban public serving university in the country, with a heavy emphasis on doing everything it can to improve the health and well-being of the city of Detroit and its citizens. And so, those two kind of go hand in hand. It's for the university to grow and for us to make strides in, at a population level, not about papers, not about grants, not about any of that stuff. It's about real change in the way people are cared for, how they care about themselves, and how society, plays a role in all that.
That's amazing. Those are amazing goals. And I think that's going to be really encouraging to members of our audience trying to understand their place in academic medicine, whether they know they're going to go into it or whether that's just a career option they're trying to explore. And I know for a large proportion of our audience, it's going to be about research, like you kind of addressed earlier. So how do you establish yourself as an independent researcher, especially as a physician or just like a scientist? How can you explain that to us? Because I know you have experience at the CDC and NIH.
Yeah, so at this point, I've had, I think, maybe more grants funded than unfunded, but there's been a number of grants written. I've served on a bunch of different grant review panels, and I played a role in a lot of grant efforts from Wayne State and far beyond. But I think the first and foremost thing is that people need to aspire to work with good colleagues and in teams, and not think of it as an independent investigator. That sort of model still exists, right? It maybe exists more in the doctoral world, where people still in basic science especially think of the so-and-so lab, or you're going to join this group and this is what they do, and they've been doing it for 20 years, and maybe they'll do it for another 20, and who knows, right? But in clinical medicine, we think much more broadly about sort of teams and about the type of work you're doing, which is, is it observational survey sample stuff? Is it interventional? Is it population level? Is it implementation science? Is it whatever? And so, as you kind of think about that, it's really, where do you want to go with your career? And that changes depending on the stage that you're at and what you're able to do. But I think knowing the type of work you want to do and aligning yourself with the type of mentors who do that work is always the most important first step, right? It's very hard to go it alone. There's very little credibility that somebody who's just beginning out in academia is going to have with grant reviewers, right? I'm not going to look at somebody the first time around applying for something and say, let's let's put $1 million on this person because we think they have the right idea. And it's not so much that the idea is not the right idea, it's can they do the job? And so that credibility is the key to building up your academic grant portfolio. You can start small, working with institutional grants, foundation grants. That often is the right way to go. Build upon that once you start to get preliminary work and establish your sort of content expertise, right? The direction that you want to take your career. And then you can kind of build out from there, if that makes sense. But I guess to say it this way, start with where you really want to be. Think about what it is you want to be doing in 5 or 10 years. Establish the partnerships and the mentorships early on with people who work in that area, and then build the blocks up to get there. Start small, build big.
Okay. And that kind of ties into my next question. How do you create that network or connections in academic medicine, whether it is for research or just trying to work your way up the pedestal in terms of teaching or trying to be in administration?
Well, it's funny. In the beginning, you have to actively seek them out. As you get further on, they seek you out. So, it goes both, in both directions like that. But I think you can't be intimidated to send that email to somebody you don't know, saying, you know of their work and you're interested in talking with them. I think you'll find that across academia, most people are very willing to have that initial conversation, at least respond to an email. However, I will caution, make sure you have the right punctuation, make sure it's clean, make sure it looks the part. I think a lot of people mistake that initial interaction as somewhat of an informal communication they may have with one of their friends or something. Not that I'm formal or anything like that, but in just this world, you want to make sure that you present yourself as somebody who takes everything seriously to the smallest detail. Because if I have a choice between 10 people who are going to come work with me and my research team, and 9 of them can't take the time to correct the punctuation in the email they're sending me, I'm going to take the one person who does, because I know they're going to pay attention to details. And so that type of stuff is really important in the beginning. But you make the network by reaching out and proving yourself, and the proof that you show, then it just builds upon itself. And I think, that's why, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's why I was initially saying, the aspiration isn't to be a lone wolf. The aspiration isn't to, stand off to the side and build your environment. It's, at least I think to be most effective, you really have to be interdigitated, and you have to know a guy, right? Porn stars, right? That, I know a guy, right? You always have to know a guy or, a girl or whomever, somebody. And the more people you know, the more connected you are. But that only comes from being receptive to it and being proactive in knowledge.
That is amazing, because in being proactive, I think you have to have a certain, like you said, necessary skills to prove that you have the capabilities to serve the job, and especially in academic medicine research, in terms of education, in terms of clinical care, and many other things. So in terms of your career and what you've seen in your lab and many other things, what are the strongest skills someone can have going into academic medicine, specifically as a researcher as of right now?
So, academic medicine and research, they don't go hand in hand. And I'm sure you're aware of that. And I'm sure you guys have talked about that. One of the things that often happens for the MD side of it, right, is people think just because they're a doctor, they're automatically good at research. You're a smart guy, everybody's smart. And so research just is a matter of intelligence. And it's not. There's a process of research that you have to learn as much as the science behind what it is you're trying to do. And as you go through the steps, it's almost like apprentice. At different levels, you have to learn some of the basic building blocks in order to be able to do work efficiently and effectively. And if you're always sort of repeating the lessons you didn't learn, right, your efficiency and effectiveness is going to be hampered. And as you build upon that, you also start to realize what type of team you need to surround yourself with, what type of expertise do you need to be able to yield activity to, so that you can be more efficient and effective as you grow. So it's almost like, you have to learn all the steps and not always do all the steps, although I do recommend that everybody do at least at one point their own IRB and their own, documents and do all of that stuff and collect your own data and run your own analyses. So you have to understand what it is you're going to ask people. But as you go forward in your career in academic medicine, you're fewer and fewer going to be doing those activities and getting further and further up in terms of your role in the grant, right? You go from, maybe in the beginnings, you're a research assistant, and then you're a coordinator, and then you're an investigator, and then you're a POI, and then you're a PI. You know what I'm saying? PI, principal investigator. So I think, it's those types of things that you want to think about, as you're trying to just get that foot in the door, right? In some ways, it doesn't really matter where you enter, right? As long as you get the skills that are afforded by that position.
It's amazing. So can you also talk about some of your strongest skills that you've seen in terms of educating within the academic realm?
Yeah, so, I guess, related to the skills itself, what I'm trying to say is that the biggest skill is willingness, right? The biggest skill is openness. The biggest skill is going to be receptivity towards uncertainty and the ability to take what you've learned from your experience over time and apply it in different circumstances. That adaptability is key. I'm a big fan of innovation from the roles that I do, but the ability to innovate to me is how you recall the things that you've built over time in those earlier apprentice roles or whatever, so that you then apply them in a unique circumstance going forward. And those are the types of skills that really help you move on. What I'm looking for is the one who I've been working with for a little while, who I can trust with a job, but then who then says, well, why don't we try it this way? And you're like, oh, that's great. Where'd that come from? And then they can explain exactly where it came from because they've been building up these things over time. So I guess it's, to your question of skills are required, right? And there are some things that are innate, but it's these characteristics that go with it that are really important.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to transfer into our next main point of this topic. It's about your daily structure and routine as a faculty member in academic medicine. So give a breakdown about how your week looks in terms of your professional clinical interest and then your research and then educating and administrative as well.
Again, it evolves over time, right? And so oftentimes, as you move up in faculty sort of levels, you increase the breadth of what you're doing because one thing is often synonymized with something else, right? You're a good researcher, therefore you are the next person to be the chair of the department. You're good at this, therefore you should do this additional role as well. They don't always mean the same thing. So some people who want to have an entire career dedicated towards research should understand that early on, right? They should understand that they like scientific inquiry and they like writing grants and papers. And the goal is to be successful in that realm. Other people start that realm because they think it gives them some level of credibility or higher stature. That researchers are sort of seen in that direction. And then they jump to an administrative level, which has a whole different set of things that go into it. Others, will still remain primarily clinical down the road. And so, in a day-to-day thing, it varies. And so for me, I wear a lot of different hats. And so I still work as a clinician in the ER. I have my administrative responsibilities, overseeing the work for Wayne Health, which is, a physician practice group. And I have my administrative responsibilities as assistant VP for the university, where I am overseeing research infrastructure, ranging from our statistical cores to our biobank to our research informatics. And so, it ends up being a lot of meetings. It ends up being a lot of time writing papers and grants and the like, and a lot of conversations around, very different things. Each hour to the hour is something different throughout the day.
That's very interesting. So, and that, I think it also ties back to what you said earlier, going through those steps and then the change and the dynamics in your professorship. And I know you have a unique, I'll say, characteristic in terms of your place in academic medicine, that you're an endowed professor. What does that mean to our audience? Because I hear assistant professor, associate professor, professorship, a full professor, but what is an endowed professor?
So all of those things that you just articulated are rankings in universities, and they're relatively synonymous across universities. An endowed professor is usually a named professorship in a department. Can be at a different level, but in a department that somebody has donated money for that purpose, and dollars sit in an endowment. A corpus of dollars sits in an endowment, and it accrues interest at some certain rate each year. And the interest that it accrues sits in an account that an endowed professor can then use to put towards other research activity. It's sort of a way of, or other academic pursuits. It's a way to say, not only have you done a good job academically in rising up, we trust you to use these dollars wisely for further pursuits of academic growth, whether they be, your own academic growth or the support for others.
That's amazing. So would you say that your opportunities inside of academic medicine, going from assistant professorship to an endowed professorship, has given you opportunities you wouldn't get otherwise, such as in private practice or a hospital-based?
Yeah. I think it's not even context. And this is nothing against people who only work clinically or who work in private practice. I love what I do as a doctor, right? Being a physician and taking care of patients. I enjoy that human interaction. What I don't enjoy is all of the systematic difficulties and challenges that healthcare layers on top of that encounter, be it socioeconomic stressors, poor continuity of care, just to name a few. So, you can make a choice in that section to do something about it or deal with it, right? And, I think a lot of people deal with it and say, it's the system. I've always been the person who said, no, we're going to fix the system. And I think academia gives you that opportunity because you can get involved in administrative leadership to help affect change. You can drive science that proves why this approach is better than the approach we're currently doing, and we should go in this direction, and that comes from academia. And then, you asked me something very early on, sort of what are goals? An unspoken goal as you become a professor, in medicine, is that you really take a lot of pride in watching the success of people that you've mentored, right? And so seeing others who because of you or through your assistance have developed their own thing and are thriving, you don't get that outside of academia. I mean, you can take a junior partner and have them come into your practice and work with them and whatnot, but helping to shape someone's future is a really enjoyable piece of academia.
That's amazing, because I know we all are looking for mentors, especially when it comes to pre-medical students, medical students, to residents. What attributes should they look in terms of a mentor, especially in terms of going into academic medicine? Are there certain things they should look for?
Yes. The most important thing is, does the person have time for you? And I think the second most important thing that relates to that question is, where are you at in your career? I think a lot of people, there's very different levels of need for mentorship. So I'm where I'm at here and I still need mentorship, right? Everybody needs mentorship. It's just different kinds of mentorship. If I need guidance now, I go to a different set of people who can provide guidance to me. And I think at each stage of your career, there's a different need you have from a mentor relationship. But along the way, you have to know where you're at so that you can align with the appropriate person, right? The person I was 20 years ago when I was mentoring medical students is not the person I'm now. I don't have as much time for medical students now. And as much as I would like to mentor medical students, it's just not something I can do as well as I'd like. And so, for someone to try to find a mentor, they should understand where both sides are at and what their needs are. And I think that the toughest thing, from a mentor side of it, looking at a mentee, and it's important both ways, is writing skills and the ability to do things a little bit more autonomously, right? And that's what I mean, sort of, knowing where someone is. If somebody's very early on in their career, it's going to take a lot of time from a mentor to help them get even their first publication or whatever. It's, maybe your listeners know this or not, it's 8 to 10, 15 hours sometimes to revise someone's paper, and that's a lot to ask a mentor, and the mentor has to be invested in you to do that, but has to have the time to invest,
Yes.
And so understanding that is important. And I think early on, it's appropriate not to shoot too high for who you reach out to, and make sure there's somebody who you relate to and who can be there for you. And then change it as the needs change with your, ascendancy in academia.
That's amazing. And I'm just going to close it off with just some advice and tips for our audience. Can you tell us some personal obstacles that you experienced in your journey in academic medicine?
Well, I mean, rejection is a constant in life, right? But in academic medicine, for sure, you are not always going to get the promotion you want when you want it. Your publications are not going to be accepted by the journals you send them to, and your grants are going to be ripped apart by people who you would really like to encounter sometime in your life and give them a piece of your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, all of that is going to be what you're going to deal with. But you have to walk away and take what you can learn from those encounters and use them to make you better, the next time, whether it's better because of what you learned from what that person told you, or better because you react differently the next time than you reacted then, or better because, you are just, able to weather criticism more easily. And so, all of that is tough. And so that sense of rejection and how you understand what to do with it is important. I think the other one is, it's related to it, but don't ever get too high on your horse, right? No matter where you're at, you're going to get knocked down. And the best thing to do is to kind of ride it out, right? And not get too high, not get too low, and just try to stay balanced and take it from there. And don't ever count on something as a sure thing in academia, because you never know when you're negotiating contracts, when you are, working at things. Make sure you get it written out. Make sure you know what you want before you go and start to ask for things. Right? Do your homework. Excuse me. Sorry.
Bless you.
Sorry. I think that's really important. And then at the end of the day, it's not always about being right. It's about getting the job done. And so if you have to swallow your pride and take a step back and let someone else guide the pathway, and you're going to get to the same point, which is there at the end of it, let it happen.
All right. So that kind of ties me to my next question of overcoming those obstacles and getting the job done. What have been your greatest triumphs thus far?
Well, I think the greatest triumphs really have related to patient encounters. And, despite all that I've said with research and all that I enjoy, mentoring people and helping their careers grow, my greatest overcoming of a challenge is breaking through to a patient who is recalcitrant towards whatever I'm telling them, and who may not trust me because I'm not the same race or ethnicity as they are, or they have an inherent distrust of the medical system because it screwed them over or let them down the other 100 times they've interacted with the doctor. And so, they come in with a preconceived notion of what the encounter is going to go like. To me, that initial reaction to push back when being pushed upon is not something that is always avoidable, but it's what you do with it, right? And so, I've had interactions with patients where, we've had some unkind words exchanged, and stepped away and came back and, hugged it out and really talked with them about what it is we're trying to do. And I think, it's that ability to show your own humanism and apologize and recognize when you could have been a better you, that is the most important thing to overcome those challenges.
That's amazing. And if you have any additional tips or advice for the audience, would you like to say it right now?
I would say that academia is a commitment and a lifetime. And for people who, think they can go do something and come back to academia, that's challenging, right? There's a lot of people who, set their entire goals on academia, and it's tough to do. Mm-hmm. But, when you decide this is where you want to go, and you decide that you want to be involved in academics, it's a lifelong commitment, and you have to really understand what that means. That's going to mean you're going to miss some dinners. That's going to mean you're going to have to come in on hours when you don't want to come in because there's a research patient to enroll, or you're going to have to be up, until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning writing a grant and finishing something, or dealing with tough deadlines, or having to bust hump at the end of a long day to get something done. when you finish your clinical shift, you may have 6 more hours of work to do in order to get something done. So just remember, nobody forces you to do this. You decide academia is going to be your pathway, commit to it, and get on it, and you'll really enjoy the experience at the end.
That's amazing. Thank you for this time in this interview, Dr. Levy. This has been very informational, and I believe our audience will greatly benefit from the pearls of knowledge you've dropped.
My pleasure to be here, Shane. Thanks.
Thank you. No problem. And you can also find additional videos on our page of The Pursuit of Academic Medicine on YouTube, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thank you.